Hey guys, what's up? It's Thomas here once again. Tonight we're back here with, well, VC Andrews again. And I'm actually not re-reacting to any of the videos. I'm actually doing a new one. This one's called Oldest vs. Medium vs. Newest, Murder on the Orient Express. So yeah, think of this as an old versus new triple threat. You know? Anyway, so yeah, it's been a while since I've done this, but I think it's either because of my top 10 I did with him, which by the way, sorry. Or something else, I don't know. But anyway, I just kind of curious what he's going to do with this one. So, without any further ado, be sure to like, subscribe for more. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's go.
Hey guys, it's the VC Andrews Critiquer. Long time no see. Anyway, seeing how we're in 2023, I thought I'd introduce a new style video where instead of comparing two movies, I compare three. I call this new style Oldest versus Median versus Newest. And the very first choice for this, as you can probably tell based on my way too small conductor hat and conductor outfit, is train-themed. Specifically, Murder on the Orient Express. It's the story of French detective Hercule Poirot, probably the most famous detective in literature after Sherlock Holmes, who has just cracked another case in the Middle East, but has to get back to London for his next job, and plans to do so via the Orient Express. On the way, a wealthy businessman named Samuel Ratchet reveals to Poirot that he's been getting death threats from unknown sources and wants to hire him as his bodyguard, but Poirot refuses for slightly different reasons in all three versions. So the train ride continues smoothly, until the Orient Express gets snowbound, or blocked by a tree in the Median version's case. And it turns out Ratchet was rightfully worried about his life because during the night, he was stabbed to death in his sleep, 12 times no less. And since the train was snowbound, the murderer couldn't have escaped during the night and thus is still on the train. So Poirot decides vacation is over and he's got a murderer to bring to justice. So after some fact-finding, he discovers that Ratchet was actually a criminal named LaFrancesco Cassetti, notorious for kidnapping the young daughter of a wealthy family called the Armstrongs for ransom, and then killing her anyway after the family already paid the ransom. And this caused Mrs. Armstrong to go into premature labor, give birth to a stillborn baby and die, and for Mr. Armstrong to commit suicide out of grief, and for the family maid to be framed for the crime and commit suicide out of grief for such.
Jesus Christ, dude.
So as Poirot starts to connect more and more of the dots, the more and more he starts to wonder, was the killer really in the wrong here? This story is not only Agatha Christie's most famous work, but it also may very well be the most famous whodunit story out there. Not only because the story itself is very well written and engaging, but it has quite an unexpected and interesting reveal about who the murderer was. I'm sure a lot of you know who it is already, but for the sake of drama, I'm not going to say anything about whodunits until we get to the best story round. But here's what I am going to do. Every time a clue about it is said on screen, this sound will play. Maybe you can figure out who it is if you don't know already, so better brush up on your deductive reasoning skills as we take a look at the very first Oldest versus Median versus Newest, Murder on the Orient Express.
Here we go. Time for a triple threat. So, I wonder how many rounds he's doing.
Now, of course, every mystery needs a detective skill enough to crack it, yet amusing enough to crack the audience up. And since the Scooby-Doo game weren't available as they were too busy failing at that job on HBO Max, we'll have to settle for the great
Hercule Poirot.
Sorry, Enemy fans, but that portrayal of Poirot is not one we'll be examining today. This is Best Hercule Poirot.
Come on in, guys. Got all lineup. So, shall we? First mystery is afoot. Best Hercule.
Like said before, Hercule Poirot has got to be only second to Sherlock Holmes in the status of iconic literature detectives. He's pretty blunt at times, and pleasantry is not one of his stronger traits, especially when he's interrogating. But he is delightfully eccentric and a very damn good detective. Seriously, this guy's observation and deductive reasoning skills at times almost make Sherlock's look like those of Inspector Gadget. But I digress. Which of the three Poirots is the best? All the actors gave respectable performances, but my personal favorite was Kenneth Branagh's. Why? Well, let's look at the other two Poirot's first. Albert Finney, as usual, is a delight to watch here. He was hilariously over the top almost every second he was on screen, and I loved every moment of it.
Here on this train, perhaps, but when the Yugoslavs please take over an unsolved murder case abroad, you will not remain at liberty unless you answer the questions.
I can always call my lawyers long distance.
The procurer of this disguise for the mysterious member of the Mafia who never existed, any more than the owner of this kimono existed.
But it's kind of the same problem I had with him as Scrooge. I just couldn't take him seriously. Don't get me wrong, I love a hilarious over-the-top performance. And yes, Poirot is eccentric, but like most great detectives, he's supposed to have a dignified and respectable feel as well. Albert Finney just seems to take the eccentricity a bit too far to really give off any dignified vibe. I don't know if it's the bad French accent or just the over-the-top performance. Again, I had a great time watching it, but he just didn't feel like Hercule Poirot. And make no mistake, Finney's Poirot is still an insanely talented detective, but honestly, I had more respect for Yakko Warner's portrayal of Poirot than Finney's. What about Alfred Molina?
Wow. The fact... Yeah, let's be real. When you're playing detectives, like, even if they do have some hamminess, don't go over the top, okay? Like, it's supposed to be a murder mystery, not a comedy murder mystery. What the hell? Yeah, not really the best one, to be honest. A little too zany. This is... Well, anyway, next. Sorry, I had nothing else.
Yeah, he did a fine job as the character, being sufficiently eccentric but respectable, but that's kind of what I feel his performance here is. Sufficient.
They were killed by two people, one strong, one feeble.
A woman was involved then?
We shouldn't assume that the feeble blows were inflicted by a woman. A strong woman in a grip of emotion makes an excellent assailant.
I don't know, he just kind of seems like your average detective than the quote-unquote world's greatest detective. I might shake his hand, but I definitely wouldn't salute to this guy. Kenneth Branagh just always seems to have this vibe where, no matter what role he plays, he comes off as deserving the respect he'd show an ethical president or the Duffer Brothers. I mean, this guy didn't play Gilderoy Lockhart for nothing. Well, sure, that character does not deserve anyone's respect, but that's beside the point. So this really makes his Poirot someone to look up to, but it doesn't forget the eccentricity of the character either.
I blame the chicken. Why do hens lay eggs of different sizes? It's not you, mon ami. These are two perfectly good œufs.
Even when he's being an asshole when interrogating, you still are like, a man of his debonair has every right to be that way. It really helps that Branagh's Poirot is the only one of the three that's also very physically skilled as well as mentally. I guess that makes sense since Poirot is a former police officer, which I don't believe I mentioned yet. But with Branagh, I think this guy was a graduate of Top Gun, or even better, Top Gun Maverick. But I think what I like best about his Poirot was he seemed to be the most ethical. Like early in the movie, right after the murder takes place, he's basically like, "Come on, I am on holiday." But as his Watson here Balk points out, the police will just declare one of the passengers as a suspect right away to close the case, and it will very likely be a minority. So he's willing to step in to prevent racial injustice from happening. As a diversity-loving progressive liberal, I say that's frickin' awesome. Or let's look at why each version refuses to be Ratchet's bodyguard against the Mafia gang.
I take only such cases now as interest me, and to be frank, my interest in your case is, dwindling.
Damn.
I find you intolerable.
You sell fakes to gangsters, you're suffering the consequences. I detect criminals, I do not protect them.
Now keep in mind, this is before it's revealed that Ratchet is actually Cassetti. So with Finney and Molina, their reasons basically boil down to, I barely know you, but I just do not like you.
Yeah, don't
but
care.
Branagh actually has a legit reason. He's not going to risk his life because Ratchet allegedly made a bad decision of scamming dangerous people. But I think the most powerful example of this is the ending. In each version, after the murderer is revealed, Poirot ultimately feels their motive was justifiable and agrees to let them go. But in the 2017 film, he asks to be shot because he's afraid he'll spill the beans to the cops because he just can't lie no matter what. Sure, he eventually decides he can keep a secret, but it's the thought that counts. So while all three Poirots are pretty entertaining and talented detectives, Branagh's I find the best for being the most dignified, badass, and best of all, ethical. Point goes to the newest. Though I'm sure Finney and Molina can be good sports about it, right guys?
I, perhaps to my discredit, refuse.
I'm afraid I cannot oblige you.
And that's a double. Good job for the newest.
But of course, every mystery also needs suspects, and the oldest and newest gave us a stellar all-star cast to play them.
Ooh.
And the median gave us Meredith Baxter. That was really the only name I recognized.
Wah, wah.
Anyway, we've got a big round of us, seeing how at least 85% of the characters here are in fact the suspects. So why don't we take a look at Best Suspects.
Show it. See it.
One thing I will say is, like a lot of whodunits, none of the suspects seem like especially bad people, but in actuality, they still aren't. Again, most of them are actually pretty nice, but one of them was just pushed so far by the Armstrong family tragedy that they wanted to avenge them. Let's start with Ratchet's secretary, Hector McQueen, who's
Well, before we get there, but you had to be real, like, seriously. Kill the kid after getting a ransom. The mom dies from miscarriage. Oof. Dad kills himself. Mate dies because she was blamed for it all. And this guy's just walking around just like, I got no problem, la 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 la. Wow. There's a place in hell for a guy like that. Oof. Poor Armstrongs, though. Rest in peace. Honestly, if I heard about that little connection, I would probably think, okay, so which one of these passengers has the strongest connection to the Armstrong family? Or something like that. I don't know. Sure, that was a good Hercule impression. If I'm offending anyone, sorry. It's the best I can do, okay? Oy. Yeah. Like I said, I'm not going to spoil anything. Like, normally I just give, like, little context clues, but no. It's like murder mystery. I'm keeping silent.
suspected because he was an admirer of Mrs. Sonia Armstrong. And the oldest, he's played by Norman Bates himself, Anthony Perkins. In the median, he's played by Adam James, who I've never heard of. And the newest, he's played by Josh Gad, aka Olaf. And no, I do not want to build a snowman now, in case anyone's wondering. Anyway, this character's delightfully adorable in all three versions, but my personal favorite is Anthony Perkins, mostly because he's pretty much still Norman Bates with a different name.
Just no side.
Well, we've traveled around. He was hampered by not knowing any languages.
Do you love your mother?
I did. She died when I was 8. An impressionable age. Why do you ask?
So, if for instance he was the killer, which I'm not saying he is, but if he did turn out to be, Perkins definitely seems like the least suspicious. Josh Gad's adorkable, no doubt, but he definitely had a pretty big asshole side to him as well.
Have you considered the Latin man, Marquez? Hell of a guy. You know, his kind, they don't have the same distaste for murder.
You said you don't hold a man's race against him.
I suppose depends on the race.
So this definitely makes him seem more suspicious. Adam James also seems like more than a little guilty too.
I'm sorry he's dead, but you know, if I were to be honest, I'd have to say he was a total bastard. Ooh. Looks like I just made myself a suspect, right?
So yeah, on the whole, I feel Anthony Perkins did the best job at being the least suspicious suspect. Okay, who's next? How about Colonel Arbuthnot, or Dr. Arbuthnot in the newest, and combined with a side character called Dr. Constantine, and Mary Debenham. Arbuthnot was Mr. Armstrong's best friend and former fellow soldier, or computer software business partner in the Median film's case, and Mary was Daisy's very close tutor. I think their motives speak for themselves. Anyway, Perot is especially suspicious of these two. One, because Arbuthnot is kind of an asshole.
Trial by 12 good men and true. It's a sound system.
And two, because he just happened to overhear Mary saying to him, "Not now, when it's all over, when it's all behind us." And keep in mind, these two have allegedly only known each other for a few days. Okay, semi-spoiler, they actually do know each other and have a romance. All I'm gonna say about that for now, though. Anyway, regarding Armstrong, I think I like Odom Jr.'s the best, because combining him with the more friendly and helpful Dr. Constantine allows him to do more than just be a cold asshole, and when he does act that way, it's solely out of defense for Mary, not to mention an Oscar-worthy performance by Odom Jr. But as for Mary, I personally like the oldest one the best. While the median and the newest were more shell-shocked from the tragedy, the oldest seems to have been turned into Dot Warner's cynical side, so unlike Arbuthnot, she's more entertaining than mean. Now on to Greta Olsen, aka Pilar Estravados in the newest film and cut altogether from the median. She was Daisy Armstrong's nanny who became a missionary for orphan babies in India out of guilt for failing to protect Daisy. Both Ingrid Bergman and Penelope Cruz do a great job at capturing the character's guilt as well as her super devout Christianity, but I personally favor Ingrid Bergman's performance. She just seemed a little more tortured by the events. How about Russian Princess Dragomirov or Hispanic aristocrat Nina Alvarado in the Median film? Her suspected motive is being Sonia Armstrong's godmother. She doesn't quite have as much focus or personality as most of the other suspects, and mostly exists just to provide some exposition on Sonia's mother, a once aspiring actress who is now allegedly bedridden from grief over the tragedy with her family. But the best of the three I'd say is Wendy Hiller in The Oldest. Remember, the character is a princess, and Hiller just felt like the most royal and upper class of the three. I bet a lot of you were expecting that to be Judi Dench, considering she played M in the James Bond movies. And don't get me wrong, she did do a good job, she just... I don't know, just felt a little too frail and senile to give off the regal vibe she could have years ago. And Leslie Caron does a fine job at playing her Hispanic counterpart Nina Alvarado, but she definitely didn't feel like a princess. An upper-class rich aristocrat, no doubt, but not quite a princess. Then again, I guess she technically was an upper-class rich aristocrat and not a princess, but... yeah, that's beside the point.
Depends on definition.
What about the Count and Countess Adrinia, or Mr. and Mrs. Strauss in The Median? These two seem like the most inconsequential characters. They have almost no personality. Hell, they don't even have any connection to the Armstrong family. But why was the Countess's passport smeared where her name should be? Almost like she was trying to hide something about her identity.
Wait, scratch that one.
I guess if I had to choose though, I think I like the Median version the best. That's a first win for the Median, so congrats. But that's mostly because the Count, or rather Mr. Strauss here, seems to be the closest to his wife of the three. By the way, if you're wondering why I've cut back on audio clips, it's to keep the length of this round reasonable. Seeing how the majority of the cast are in fact the suspects, this round is already long enough as is, and to that end, I'm going to kind of skim through a few of the lesser relevant suspects. Hildegard Schmidt, the Armstrongs' former cook, and Princess's current valet who's absent from the Median. I like the oldest one best because she felt naturally royal and dignified enough to serve a princess.
Newest got the main character, and the oldest got the side characters.
Pierre Michael, the conductor.
Sparkle.
Sorry, I couldn't resist. Who was also the father of the maid who was accused of the murder, or brother in the newest version's case. I like the Median best simply because he has the most screen time, and I love how he dresses like a crew staff member instead of a train one. Ratchet's valet, who's absent in the Median and whose motive I never quite got. Newest for having a slightly more dramatic performance. Foscarelli, a lover of the maid wrongly accused. Median because they make him the comic relief, which really helps bring some much needed humor to the dark story. And need we forget Cyrus Hardman, the undercover cop assigned to protect Ratchet? Geez, I wonder why that didn't work out. And yes, of course William Dafoe wins. One, because he's Dafoe, so it would be a total abomination to stiff him the point. And two, they kind of develop him a bit more. Though again, because it's Dafoe, not in the most pleasant way.
I would prefer in the future to descend not with that man. Like should be seated with like. We are not alike. To mix your red wine and the white would be to ruin them both.
No, this doesn't really have much purpose to the story, but it is another despicable Dafoe performance for us to love to despise. But for me, the big deciding point is Miss Caroline Hubbard, played respectively by Lauren Bacall, Meredith Baxter, and Michelle Pfeiffer. Too bad Yakko couldn't play Perot in this movie. Then again, he probably wouldn't have liked his idol chewing him out every 5 seconds. Yeah, for some very strange reason, Miss Hubbard seems to be the most cold and aloof passenger on the train, which is strange because she doesn't have any connection to the Armstrong family. Or does she?
Ugh, I'm bad at this.
Anyway, as you may have guessed by the trend of this round, I like Lauren Bacall's portrayal the best. Baxter and Pfeiffer were indeed very cold, but they both played her more like a moody teenage girl pouting because her daddy won't buy her a Ferrari.
So the rich spoiled brat.
Murder here last night. Everyone on board knows it, but do you guys admit it? No.
I told your conductor, and he wouldn't believe me. I said, check the communication door between my room and Ratchet's. He must have left through there. Sure enough.
Lauren Bacall was cold in a way that just said, kiss my feet or eat lead, bitches. Like she could seize control of a country just by casting a death glare.
Well, don't waste time yammering. Again.
By now, Mr. McQueen has doubtless informed you of the true identity of Mr. Rhett.
Yes, that low down.
Were you acquainted with the Armstrongs?
No, of course not. They were a very social family.
It's kind of like Perot. I just had very little respect for the second two because they were kind of arrogant prima donnas, but Bacall felt like she could scare the fangs off a lion. And since I kind of gave it away already, you'll
Yeah.
soon see that this is very fitting for her character later. Okay, let's wrap this up. Good performances from all the casts, but since I prefer most of the cast in the oldest
There you
scores
go.
the suspects point.
And
Point goes to the oldest.
I'll be expecting a refund for everything I've gone through.
I knew he was a rotten one.
Yeah, you're all rotten. Yeah, just a little heads up. Sorry, before we get there, but I gotta say, it's actually pretty interesting, you know? I mean, normally it's usually the oldest main character wins and the newest side cast wins, but here's the flip, too. But so far, no one's for the median yet, which, again, I'm not sure, considering like it's 2001. I'm not sure they are going to get the win, but hey, who knows? They might. Oh, and also, if you guys want a little hint as to what the heck's going on, do me a quick favor. Look up a name. Ken Rex McElroy. You'll get the idea. Okay?
But of course, even the greatest detectives need at least a little support to crack a case. And this case, no pun intended, be the case by being the villain and the victims. Come on, I mean, almost all the characters here are the suspects, so I had to cram all the remaining ones into this round. Anyway, let's take a look at Best Supporting Cast.
Here we go again. Let's wrap things up. Round 3. Morning cast. Go.
Let's start with Faulk, the railway director and Poirot's best friend and eventual Dr. Watson when the murder occurs. Well, kind of. I mean, he tags along for a lot of the investigations and interrogations, but he really
Basically
doesn't
the
do much
sidekick.
except say aloud that each suspect they just interviewed had to have been the murderer. With that said, though, he does have great
A little too
chemistry with
soon.
Poirot in all 3 versions, and will offer his emotional support in any way he can. I guess I like the median one the best, though, because he seems to participate the most with the investigation, and he just felt like the most competent and dignified of the 3, so I guess that makes him the most worthy to be the Watson to the world's greatest detective, kind of like with Hildegard and the Princess. What about the
Dang,
coroner, Dr.
good job.
Constantine? He's axed from the median, and like I said before, is combined with Colonel Arbuthnot in the newest. And like Arbuthnot, I like this version better because 1, combining him with
So
said
that's one
character
me and
makes
one
him all
new.
the more interesting, and 2, he just seems like the more competent and dignified doctor. Now for the Armstrongs. Though considering they only appear in photos and flashbacks with no
Flashbacks,
lines, do they even qualify? Well, seeing how there are so few other characters that aren't suspects, I really didn't have a choice, did I? Let's start with the father, Steve Armstrong. So yeah, in case you didn't notice by now, the median updates the story to the time of its release of 2001. More info on that a bit later. And like I said before, reimagines Mr. Armstrong as a software developer rather than a soldier.
AK Wastebank.
And I like this version the best for 2 reasons. 1, I think it's very fitting and funny that they have him look like a young Bill Gates. Plus, this is the only version where we actually see his corpse after killing himself, stirring even more emotion for him, as well as the only one where we see him with Arbuthnot, and these 2 do indeed look like they had a very happy friendship. In the oldest, we only see him briefly along with his wife in the intro, and, nice mustache. And the newest, he appears more, but we don't see his face very well, so we can't get as strong of a saddened feel for his pain. But his
So
wife
another
is
medium
another
for the
story in
Armstrongs
the
this
newest.
time.
This is the only version where we full-on see her happiness and joy turn to shock and horror as her daughter is kidnapped and killed, and it's a pretty impressive performance, alright. Hell, this is the only version where we actually see Sonia go into premature labor, or at least the start of it to keep a PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
Again, we only see her in the oldest very briefly in the intro, and in the median, she appears a few times here and there, but her performance isn't nearly as strong as in the newest.
again,
and as
do
for
the
little
2.
Daisy herself, she is a pretty cute kid in all 3 versions, but just look at this face in the median. I mean, really
That's
look at
3-2.
it. Only someone as inhuman as Ratchet could ever harm such an adorable little angel. Plus, listen to how a news reporter describes her.
Daisy was a vivacious and enchanting child. That made the tragic death all the more unbelievable.
The fact that Daisy was such a great kid that the usually formal news would describe her in a personalized manner is just, well, frickin' awesome. Oh yeah, and I guess I should mention the wrongly accused maid as well. Doesn't appear on screen in the oldest, and newest wins because her agony is so much stronger than in the median.
So
and of
tell
course,
me
there's
again.
the true villain of the story, the Francisco Cassetti, and which one is
Cassetti.
the best, or more appropriately, the worst? I like the one in the median best, played by Peter Strauss. Why? Well, let's look at the other 2
Just when I
first.
complain
Johnny
about the
Depp
median,
in the newest
there
is
we go.
way too obvious. The way he looks and talks practically shout out, I'm a gangsta posing as a decent human being and doing
I'm
a
an
really
asshole.
crappy job at it.
Screams I'm an asshole.
Did I say get it done now?
Right away, sir.
And I know I'm not the best guy born, not by a long shot. And if there's a world after this one, I will face judgment just like you. But I ain't in no goddamn rush to do it.
It wouldn't surprise me one bit if this guy's former secretary before McQueen was Muggsy, or even better, Mimsy. Yeah, I know old habits die hard, but
Mimsy
no
bro.
criminal trying to keep a low profile would possibly come off like this. Richard Widmark in The Oldest is kind of the exact opposite. He gives off virtually no vibe whatsoever that he used to be a cold-blooded gangster, but still an arrogant rich snob.
5 beakers and one of the bowls arrived.
Yeah, you probably expect him with
which
tax
it was
evasion,
not
not
when
murder.
I paid for it. Through the nose. Send a telegram from Belgrade.
Yes, yes.
But he's also extremely boring. While I praised him for being inconspicuous, this Ratchet doesn't seem to have any personality in the short
So
time
no
he
presence.
has. No oversweet personality to throw people off, he's just an average forgettable guy. I like Peter Strauss's performance the best because he seems to play Ratchet like a corrupt, selfish big business executive, which gives him personality as a villain, but doesn't make him a convict in plain sight either. Plus, this Cassetti's backstory is a little more fleshed out. Not only did he have a nickname as the Rattler due to a tattoo of a rattlesnake that he had removed while posing as Ratchet, but unlike The Oldest and Newest, where Cassetti simply fled the country before he could be persecuted, this Cassetti was caught, but used the insane ransom money to hire the greatest defense attorneys in America who got him off on a technicality.
Seriously?
I like this better because, one, it shows that justice would not have been served to Cassetti had the murderer not taken matters into their own hands, and two, it makes the whole situation even more shocking that someone would do something so horrible and still get away with it legally. But what seals the deal for me is the fact that Cassetti's pre-Ratchet self looks like a skinnier Walter White.
Does.
Being a huge
I mean, he's got
Breaking
the
Bad
glasses,
fan,
the
that
mustache.
gets my
You can really
vote.
see it.
And last but not least, let's talk about the lover for Perot that the Median and Newest add for no real reason. I guess the Median again, since she's actually alive in this version and ends up with Perot in the end, where the Newest is dead before the start of the story. So, since the Median did win the most characters here, I guess I have to give it the point. Point goes to the Median.
What does that matter?
Maybe I didn't make myself clear enough.
And we got a 3-way tie so
Now, when
far.
it comes to a murder mystery, atmosphere is everything. You really
so
need an
time
exciting
for the Best
environment to
Orient
coincide
Express.
with your exciting story. So which film pulls that off the best? This is Best Atmosphere.
Here we go. Shall we? Let's go. Again.
It's pretty hard to
Guessing new
separate
here,
the
but we'll see.
atmosphere and story when it comes to a murder mystery, but I couldn't think of anything else to talk about, so beggars can't be choosers. Anyway, I'm sure this will surprise none of you, but it's definitely not the Median. Okay, first of all, I don't have any problem with the fact that they update the story to present day, because the overall story is pretty timeless, so it does transition fine for the most part, with a few small exceptions that I'll talk about in the best story round. My problem is, it looks so damn cheap. I get this is for television, so they obviously didn't have the
TV
budgets of
miniseries.
the oldest
Good
or
enough.
newest, but everything from the camera shots, the coloring, the lighting, it definitely leaves something to be
feels like a lab
desired.
track
Like, I
or
don't
just
necessarily
a-
mind that the train is
Ooh.
stranded by a fallen tree in the forest instead of a snowbank in the freezing mountains, and I get that would have been pretty expensive for a TV production, but the forest itself honestly doesn't look all that spectacular. I will give the film credit that the characters do probably go outside off the train the most in this version, so it is kind of nice to see more than just the train. Hell, I don't think they even get off the train even once during the investigation in The Oldest. I just wish we had a nicer forest for them to be walking around in. And I'm sorry, but this is the engine that pulls the Orient Express. The frickin' Orient Express, the most famous and luxurious train in the entire world. This was really the best looking
That's
engine
cheap.
the filmmakers could afford. Hell, even Tilly the engine, who's too little, would be more qualified to pull the Orient Express than this piece of scrap metal.
She is not too little.
Yes, she is, Scott Minville. Just like my respect for you as Robin and Beast Boy after Teen Titans Go came out.
Big blowhard.
Bird Brain. The shots of
screw off.
Istanbul at the very beginning do look pretty nice, though. Okay, so sorry, Median, but no dice.
Yep,
now on
bye,
to the
Median.
oldest and newest.
Now it's two.
And the newest wins, as I'm sure a lot of you probably guessed.
Yeah,
For those who
look how
didn't know,
thick it is.
Brando not only played Perot in the newest, but he also directed the feature, which
Really?
honestly may explain why it looks
Whoa.
so damn good. The writing of Brandau's works are kind of hit or miss, but he really knows how to make his movies look good. And this honestly may be his most beautiful looking movie ever. The lighting, the colors, the costumes, the sets, the cinematography. The oldest look pretty good too, but this is just a marvel for the eyes, even when it looks fake. Like, compare how the train gets snowbound. In the oldest, it's just blocked by a snowbank, but in the newest, the snowbank literally falls on the engine, slightly derailing and freezing it. Well, on a frickin' bridge, no less. And yeah, the CGI is kind of fake looking, but doesn't it look amazing still? Whoa. Speaking of engines, this is definitely an engine worthy of pulling the most famous train in the entire world. Also, while it doesn't have quite as many instances of the passengers getting off the train as in the median, the scenes it does have are pretty impressive. Like, we see Perot actually walking on the tops of the train cars for really no reason other than it looks cool. Or remember the big scene on the support beams of the train bridge with McQueen and Perot? That was a really awesome moment. Hell, unlike the oldest or median, where Perot reveals the identity of the murderer to the passengers in the lounge car, Perot actually has a table set outside the train bridge the snowbound train is facing, and the darkness of it really helps add to the mood of the dark scene. And of course, I love how this movie is more ethically diverse with the passengers. Oh yeah, and remember that line Defoe makes about how mixing red and white wine would ruin them both? Mary Debenham comes up with the greatest comeback ever.
I like a good rosé.
And what sealed it for me was, the newest has actual 1930s music, which makes it more authentic. So congrats, newest, you get this point.
Yep,
point goes to the newest.
It was also a punishment. One can't grieve for every single...
And this is what you get for cheaping out. Bye! Going up, okay. Wrong way.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the final piece of evidence we need to crack the case of which adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express is best. The best story. Let's get right into it.
Here we go. We're down the last round. Newest is leading by 2, so who knows? We might get a tie between the newest and one of these stories, or newest might take the win. Let's see.
Okay, to start off, let's just declare who the murderer is in case you didn't know already. Though even if you didn't, you probably already guessed because it was a lot harder to hide than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Anyway, it turns out all the suspects were involved in the murder, and Mrs. Hubbard orchestrated the whole thing because she's not actually Mrs. Hubbard at all. She's actually the supposedly bedridden mother of Sonia Armstrong that the princess had mentioned earlier. Yeah, given that she lost her daughter, son-in-law, and both grandkids in such a horrific way, that would explain why she's such a tight ass. Oh yeah, and the Countess is actually her daughter and Sonia Armstrong's sister. Anyway, you may have guessed this already, but the best story in my opinion comes from the oldest. Why? Well, for one, it just seemed to have the most suspenseful tone. Like, compare how all 3 versions open. The median and newest open right with Perot on his Middle Eastern caper that has nothing overall to do with the story, but the oldest one opens with the night of the Armstrong tragedy, and good God, is it terrifying as hell. This honestly may be the most powerful movie opening with no dialogue at all until Pixar's Up. And even throughout the movie, there's small but still really effective moments of suspense. Like just after Perot refuses to be Ratchet's bodyguard, the train goes through a tunnel, and Ratchet is gone. Sure, it's revealed he just chickened out and ran back to his room to hide, but it's still an intense moment when we're wondering where he went. And the cliche usually associated with a murder kind of foreshadows what's to come with Ratchet. Speaking of which, check this out. Admit it, that moment made you jump like it did me. Little tidbits like this really make The Oldest an exciting movie throughout. I'll talk about the suspense of the other 2 movies a bit later, and on top of that, it just seems to have the wittiest writing regarding the mystery. Sure, all 3 versions share clues about the murder, like you may remember that clip I showed you earlier where Mary says she can always call her lawyers long distance even though she had never been to America and thus couldn't have known the Armstrongs. Had that been the case, Perot insists she would have said, "I can always place a trunk call to my solicitors." Or remember that clip with McQueen mentioning that Ratchet only spoke English? Poirot realizes that the previous night, he heard Ratchet allegedly answer to one of the staff members in French. This is just after the murder happens, and it's one of the suspects who does so. These are all clever clues, no doubt, but the oldest has some that are exclusive to it, and specifically hint that 12 killers were involved, like Colonel Armstrong's comment I showed you earlier about a jury of 12 being a sound legal system, the murder taking place at midnight. Hell, just compare the threatening messages the passengers sent to Cassetti. Where in the median it's just the usual deep voice phone calls, and in the newest it's the usual letters cut out of magazines. In the oldest, the 2 death threats Ratchet receives each have 12 letters, with 1 letter being written by each suspect. That is just frickin' brilliant writing. Okay, so let's talk a little about the other movies. Again, I don't really have much problem with the median being set in the present day of its release. It is kinda neat to hear the modern day references mixed in with the story.
You followed the Armstrong case.
Oh, country followed. It was the biggest case since OJ.
Steve Armstrong was a genius at designing and marketing software. His bang was so powerful it was considered a threat to Microsoft.
And the dialogue actually is still pretty timeless for the most part, with no modern slangs and stuff. The only major problem I have with it is how Poirot discovers Ratchet's true identity. In the oldest and newest, he forensically restores the burnt death threats, but in the median, he just pulls a videotape from the trash can and plays it. Hell, he doesn't even do anything to restore it. That's not as impressive. And the story, honestly, here is just not very suspenseful in this version. Nothing about the music or the acting or the pacing really kept me on my seat. It felt like it was playing safe for FCC regulations. And the newest was definitely dramatic and action-packed, but it wasn't necessarily all that suspenseful. It was indeed in some parts, but I felt more engaged by the drama and acting than I was at the edge of my seat shivering at the tension. Now let's talk about the flashback to the murder itself. In the newest, all the passengers just stab Cassetti a few seconds after one another. Yeah, the black and white makes it look intense, and the looks on their faces are just psychotic, but it just feels a bit too rushed to leave a strong enough impact for me. In the median, it's much better paced, and I like how Poirot narrates each of their motives as they stab Cassetti.
Armstrong's best friend. The man he had grown up with, and grown rich and powerful with.
But again, there's really nothing that creatively intense about it visually. In the oldest, the scene is almost perfect. Miss Hubbard and the conductor go in, shut off the lights, all except for this really eerie blue light that makes the scene intense as hell. And not only does the same terrifying music from the kidnapping in the prologue play here, but just listen to how incredibly each actor conveys their character's grief and motivation for their loved ones as they stab Cassetti.
My daughter.
My daughter.
My granddaughter.
Memory of Colonel Armstrong. A great soldier. An even greater friend.
From Mother Armstrong. From Hector. God rest the soul of my dear dead daughter.
With that said though, I do think the very ending of the newest is the best. And the oldest and median, Poirot pretty much says, yeah, Cassetti got what he deserved, I won't squeal. The passengers are overjoyed and it's happily ever after. The finale of the newest is a hell lot darker. After Poirot reveals his theory, Miss Hubbard begs him to tell the cops it was only her and let the other passengers go. Poirot, like I mentioned before, says he won't be able to lie to the cops and begs them to shoot him, but relents when Miss Hubbard is about to shoot herself, feeling she has nothing left. So he contemplates the situation as the train heads back, the passengers waiting in tension for the outcome, and then he reveals to them that he lied to the cops and said an enemy of Ratchet posing as a conductor was the killer, using this justification.
I have understood in this case that the scales of justice cannot always be evenly weighed. And I must learn for once to live with the imbalance. You are all free to go. May you find your peace with this.
That's a stronger ending in my book. And to be honest, this is a pretty strong story in general. I already knew the twist beforehand because it's relatively common knowledge, but I still went into this expecting a somewhat generic and cliched murder mystery, but instead got a very captivating, exciting, and unpredictable story filled with complex characters, emotional drama, and a damning commentary on how ethics and morality won't always be black and white. What may appear to be cold-blooded murder may in fact turn out to be vigilante justice for awesome people who got killed in the most heinous way imaginable. But the story that tells it the strongest, in my opinion, is the oldest. So, what's the outcome? Let's see,
we got a
two
tie
oldest, two newest, and one median. Does that mean it's a tie for the oldest and newest, like in the Worst Witch review? You know, the one where I brought in a surprise contestant at the end with a Tim Curry TV movie version, resulting in the HBO and Netflix series tying? Well, it's a little different when you have 3 contestants right from the start instead of 2 in only 5 rounds. Remember, not all categories are equal, and seeing how the oldest did win the best story round, and said round is arguably the most important part of a film, I do feel that makes it the best film of the 3. Yeah, I know it's kind of biasing, but like I also mentioned in my Worst Witch review, it's my show, so I can do whatever the hell I want. Point and victory go to the oldest, the superior adaptation.
I find you intolerable.
May you find your peace with this. May we all.
I mean, certainly the oldest had the better tension, I guess, in a way. Makes sense. Sorry if I started a little late, sorry. So, yeah, I mean, compared the two, like, I get, like, the whole, like, the newer one had, like, the ethical problems and, like, you know, better Hero, we'll go with that. But, again, it's pretty much up to you guys, you know? So, what do you guys think? Old, new, let me know. Honestly, for me, I mean, if you're looking for tension, definitely go with the older one. But if you want something a little more action-packed with some great moral dilemmas, go for the newer one. Again, it's totally up to you. So, for now, that's going to be it for me tonight. Thanks for watching, everybody. Till next time, like, subscribe for more. See ya.